Hello, and welcome to the Hidden Secrets to Health. This is your host, Christina Cole. I'm a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and certified health coach. And I started doing, the Hidden Secrets to Health because I really wanted to share some of the other opportunities we have in healing our bodies. And today I'm going to kind of touch on a few different topics that seem to come up a lot with my clients, with friends, and just kind of in what's going on in the world today. So one of the things that I've been working on personally that I really wanted to share because I think it has some pretty phenomenal healing possibilities is when you start working with your chakras. So your chakras run basically from the top of your head to your tailbone. And a lot of the times when we're working on our chakras, we tend to be working in our upper chakras. And I certainly have quite a bit over the years. That's really when you're doing your affirmations and you're really trying to change your mindset. And this is when we start talking about how we operate from our subconscious level, more like the 95% or 90% of the actions that we take every day are really coming on autopilot. They're coming from our subconscious. And so there are times when we are sort of self-sabotaging and we don't even know it because it's just sort of our behavior. It's sort of a learned behavior. And so I started working in the last couple of weeks on my first and second chakra, which is the lower chakras. And that's really the chakras where you are manifesting what is happening in your life. So I think I've done really well with my upper chakras, but it really has been a surprise to me how much work I really need to have in my lower chakras, because that's where you sort of bring all this energy through the top of your head down into your lower chakras. And that's really where you manifest. And that's how you manifest your success, frankly. And that kind of surprised me. And one of the reasons why I started working on these chakras was because I could tell that I've been blocking myself with my own business and with the successes that I want to have and kind of showing up in the way that I want to show up. So I've done all this work on my personal health, being, shifting my diet and eradicating bacterial overgrowths and fungal overgrowths and things that we pretty commonly have. It's just not really talked about or worked on with allopathic medicine. And so I've done those things and I feel healthy, but there was kind of something missing. There was a link missing and I was really struggling to figure out what it was. So I've gone to a brain coach and I've done affirmations and I feel like I've tried so many different things. And it wasn't until I started working with Margaret Lynch, who has a book called Tapping into Wealth, that I really kind of figured out where my blocks are in my first and second chakra. And that's really your inner child, which you'll hear more and more sort of holistic psychologists talking about healing the inner child and how do you do that? And where does that come from? Like, I feel like I had a great childhood. So why would I have blocks in my first or second chakra? Well, these are kind of like, again, it goes back to that autopilot and what you observed. So the first 7 years of your life, your energy level is in a theta level, which means that you're more of an observer and you're sort of taking everything in. And you don't have the power or the energy level that kind of tells you, okay, this isn't okay, or this isn't how I feel, or you can't really decipher the information that's coming in. You're just taking it in. And so you have to think about the fact that your parents just took in what they were perceiving at the time that they were from birth to 7, and their parents the same, and kind of goes back, right? So if there's baggage that's sort of been traveling down the ancestral path and no one has kind of stopped and cleared them, then we just continue to pass them on. And I don't think anyone's ancestors would want them to stifle their creativity or stifle their ability to make money or to live the lifestyle that they want to live and provide for people in the way that they want to. And so that's really been illuminating for me in the first and second chakra, because one is sort of how safe do you feel in this world, and what kind of messages are you repeating to yourself, and how many of those messages are you even aware of that's keeping you from doing things. So I went to a seminar with this particular brain coach, which I love, and one of the other people that were there that I know, she was just like, you really need to be more visible. And I just thought, how more visible can I be? I mean, I've got a radio show, and I put myself out there, I've got stuff on social media, and I go and do events and all this kind of stuff. And that visibility thing really comes down to that first and second chakra and how comfortable I feel just saying what I'm thinking, and taking ownership of wanting to be present in the way that I want to be present. And so I'm still working through that. I'm still kind of working through, and I kind of love the tapping process. So it's also called EFT, or emotional freedom technique. And you tap on your pulse points, on your meridian points. So it's like you can karate chop on your hand, which is a really great tool to teach our children, because if you have a anxiety about something, that's a really easy thing for them to do, even if they're in a classroom, is sort of karate chop their two hands together. And that's a release point. So it's also the top of your head. It's where your eyebrows start. It's the corner of your eyes. It's just below on kind of like your orbital bone. Under the nose, sort of between your lips and your nose, your chin, your cleft of your chin, and then sort of right on the collarbone of your, on each side. And then you can also go right at, for women, what we would call the bra line. So if you kind of press on each of those as you're sort of working through what you have this emotional hang up on, it helps release it. And so as you go through the first and second chakra, you kind of start working into, maybe you feel like you have to please everyone, or you have to show up in the world in a certain way. Like you can't, if you want too much of your own attention, then that's being selfish. Or if you're really proud of yourself for something and you express that, well, now you're being arrogant. And so we kind of have these inherited things that we learn, and we learn it in school. We learn it from our behavior with friends, or we learn it in a work environment. I worked in financial services for 20 years. And there were times when I was just like, I don't like who I am here, or who I'm supposed to be while I'm here, because it's like being a woman in financial services has come a long way, but I was certainly in it when it was mostly men, and it was not comfortable a lot of the time. There was certainly a lot of language that you just had to get used to and really become part of your own language. You had to kind of be tough and one of the guys, and also you were also a sex object in most of these environments, and that's really just the way that it was. And so the way that you behave and sort of the damage that causes for you is something that you really have to work through. And I don't think that we always do. I think we kind of, if I don't talk about it, if I ignore that situation, then I won't have to deal with it, but it doesn't actually go away. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned from the first and second chakras, is that even if you think that this isn't a problem, you're manifesting it, you're holding it, and it's showing up in the things that you really want to accomplish and do. And then if you have children, you're passing that on to your children. And that's something that I try to be really cognizant of, is wanting my kids to pursue the dreams that they have without any hangups of mine or from me, like what I think they should do, what I think they should pursue, what sports I think they should or shouldn't do. I really have to let go of what my expectations are so that they can come into their own without having these expectations, right? Because most of us, I think, grow up wanting to please our parents, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it shouldn't be to a point where it damages what you want to pursue or what you want to do, because ultimately this is your life. This is, you're here for a purpose. We're all here for a purpose. You're here for a purpose, and you need to be pursuing what your purpose is. And if you get sidetracked and go down a road that is pleasing to someone else in your life, but not to you, we start to hold that in. And you'll see that come out in so many different ways. That's why a lot of times you'll see people that self-medicate, and you'll see chronic diseases that are held in different places in our body. Like we hold a lot of anger in our liver. We hold a lot of sorrow in our intestinal tract. We hold sorrow in our lungs, which I thought was really fascinating when we did the grief show. And so when we don't kind of move through these different feelings and go through these different steps for healing, then we manifest illnesses within ourselves. And the connection that I have found between this energetic field and our overall health is pretty dramatic. And one of the things that I've learned about in FDN, which is actually where I learned about emotional freedom technique, was how even if you cater to all the different health challenges that someone has by helping them with their the DRESS protocol, right? Diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, and supplementation. If you have emotional things that are happening, then more than likely these things are going to reoccur, because that's where we're putting them in our body. And so for me, I really wanted to continue to grow my business and be financially successful in doing that, and being able to afford private school for my kids, and having a lifestyle that I want to lead. Well, if I don't kind of clear out some of my baggage, then I'm not going to be able to do that. And it's probably going to show up in my health in some other way. And so that's when I started doing the EFT, the tapping, and I just started doing that like 2 weeks ago. And I will tell you that there's all kinds of different emotions that come up. And there's a lot of different things that you have aha moments about that you really weren't aware of. And this isn't a way to like start getting mad at your family, because that's not what this is about. This isn't about blaming anyone, because everyone's parents, for the most part, in my opinion, are doing the best that they can. And I'm sure there are those out there that's maybe not. But generally speaking, I think we try as a human race to do the best that we can. And so this isn't a blame situation. This isn't a getting upset with family members. This is a way for you to work through sort of some of this baggage you might not even be aware you have, in a safe way, in a healing way, and you can start letting go of these things that are holding you back. And it's been really powerful for me. I've been really surprised and pleased with the experience. And I'm actually really looking forward to sharing that with my clients, because that's one of the things that we work with is the stress reduction. And this is a form of being able to help somebody with stress reduction, because there are the internal stresses that we have in our health. And then there are the emotional stresses that we have. And a lot of times these emotional and physical stresses become financial stresses, because when we don't care for ourselves, it becomes so much more expensive to care for yourself when you're ill than to care for yourself when you're well, and to stop sort of the decline or the slide into not being well. And so when you have to take pharmaceutical medications, well, now you're beholden to either having a job that covers you for insurance that will cover that particular medication. The pharmaceutical company could change it. They could raise prices. I think we've seen that over the years, where different medications suddenly skyrocket in price and people can't afford them. So getting to a point where you don't have to be on medication is a goal. And so healing all of yourself is part of that process. And I also think you have to come to it when you're ready for it. I have experienced moments where I'm like, I wish that I'd known this earlier. I wish I had done this sooner. But I don't think that I was really ready sooner than now. I don't think I was in a place that I would be able to process the information in an open-minded way that allows me to heal, but to also that doesn't, I'm not looking to blame anybody. I'm not looking to be mad at anybody. It's a wonderful form of forgiveness to myself, forgiveness to experiences that I've had in my life and experiences that, you know, I expect that my parents have had and that my siblings have had and friends have had that end up kind of dumping onto, you know, your friendship. And so it's I can't even think of the word that I would want to use. It's really enlightening, I suppose. And it is lightening of your spirit. And so I guess that's my little spiel that I wanted to share today on why your chakras are important, why healing them is important, and why as much as work as we might do on the upper portion of our chakras, right, from like the throat chakra to the third eye to, you know, your the crown of your head, those are all beautiful. But if you're doing that work and you're not able to pull it down and actually manifest what you want out of your life, then you're going to have, it's going to be a source of frustration. And you're going to start to wonder, why am I doing this if this isn't working? And I was sort of starting to get to that point where I was like, gosh, I'm doing all this work. I'm doing all these things that all these gurus say you should do. And I still feel this block and I can't figure out what it is. And so I'm super excited. I'm thrilled to see like how this is going to change. I'm on I'm doing the 7 levels of chakra manifestation with Margaret Lynch. It's a new program she's got coming out. And so far, it's been really exceptional. It's been a really cool experience for me. And it's one that I've been telling to some of my other health coaching friends, like, oh, you know, if you haven't done this, you totally have to try this out, because it's something to share with your clients as well. And I think it's just part of the whole package. So when I come back, some of the things that I actually want to talk about are other things that have come up with my clients and with friends and family. And that's sort of some of the things that are in our food. And I'm going to touch on a hot topic, being vaccines, and glyphosate. That's kind of to me, they kind of go together. So I really want to talk about that. So when we come back from our break, I might get a little controversial. It'll be kind of exciting. So we'll be right back. Welcome back to Hidden Secrets to Health. This is your host, Christina Cole. I'm a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and certified health coach. And I started the show talking about chakras and my personal experience of working through my 7 chakras and how I recognize that most of the time that I've spent working through my chakras has really been probably from my 5th, 6th, and 7th chakras, and not really pulling any of that down, and certainly never working on my 1st or 2nd. And finding out that that's really where my blocks are. And if I can kind of clear those chakras, then I'm going to start manifesting things in a much greater way. So stay tuned for that, right? It'll be exciting for me. And you guys will be like, oh, I remember when she said she was working on that. So now in this next section, I really wanted to kind of talk about a show that I watched last night. And it's called Secret Ingredients. And it talks about genetically modified organisms in our food and the impact that it has. And to me, it really kind of relayed into also some of the controversy that's going on with vaccines and how it's the combination of these different elements that are coming into our children that are creating this epidemic of chronic diseases that we're not seeing, certainly in my generation growing up, and that we're not necessarily putting the pieces together, that we're really spending a lot of time name calling and polarizing instead of getting into the real science and the heart of these conversations and why it really matters. So in the movie Secret Ingredients, this is a Jeff Hayes film, and he's done several really illuminating movies on different things. So he's done them on genetically modified organisms. He's done it on sort of why there's this diabetes situation, and a number of different things. So if you've never heard of Jeff Hayes, I encourage you to do a Google and look him up and some of the different films that he's put out. So Secret Ingredients really talked about some different people and their experiences with food and how much food has an impact. And if you've listened to any of my prior shows, when I've spoken with some functional medicine MDs, one of the things that I ask them is, what do you find yourself recommending to every single client that walks in the door? And they both said food. Food has such a massive impact, and that has not filtered into allopathic medicine as much as I hope to see it over the future. And a lot of times it's like diet doesn't matter, but it really matters. It's the first step. And so in the show, there was a few families that spoke. And so one had her own health crisis, and then her son was on the spectrum for autism, and she really changed her diet, and the whole family changed their diet. And the child is now considered to not be on the autistic spectrum. So I also know someone who kind of went through this process themselves with their own child, and how much food made a difference, and how genetically modified organisms are having a pretty big impact on our health and our children's health, and some of these different diagnoses that we see a lot. And so one of the things I wanted to read was this quote from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, he's taken on Monsanto. He's taken on some of these mandated vaccine situations. And I personally don't think that anything should be mandated. It just goes against my belief in freedom and having a freedom of choice. But it's not about being an anti-vaxxer, because I'm not anti-vaccines. I just want safe vaccines. I want to know that these have been thoroughly tested and that they're safe for my children. And those studies don't exist. And I think that should be the argument. It shouldn't be whether you're pro or against. It should be, why don't we have better safety studies? Why is this such a massive moneymaker, but it's also creating so much illness on a autoimmune situation? So I'm just going to read this quote because I thought it was really powerful. And he says, "This is a chronic disease epidemic. I have 6 kids. I had 11 brothers and sisters. I had over 50 cousins. I didn't know a single person with a peanut allergy. Why do my kids all have food allergies? Because they were born after 1989. If you were born prior to 1989, your chance of having a chronic disease, according to HHS, is 12.8%. If you are born after 1989, your chance of having a chronic disease is 54%. That is tremendous, in my opinion. That is huge. So what are they? They're the neurodevelopmental diseases: ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, tics, Tourette syndrome, ASD, autism. The autoimmune diseases: Guillain-Barré, multiple sclerosis, juvenile diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis. The anaphylactic diseases: food allergies, rhinitis, asthma, eczema. All of these exploded in 1989. Congress ordered the EPA to do a study to find out what year the disease epidemic started. And the EPA did that study. They said it started in 1989. There's lots of culprits, many new things. We have cell phones, we have PFOAs, which is a chemical, we have ultrasound, we have glyphosate, our kids are swimming around in a toxic soup. We're not saying all of those illnesses came from vaccines, but there is no intervention that is so exquisitely and precisely timed as what happened when we went in 1989 and changed the vaccine schedule and raised the levels of aluminum and mercury, tripling and quadrupling them, and went from 3 vaccines I had as a child to the 72 that kids had and the 75 that kids will have next year. So I know for me, I think I probably had this. So that was all Robert F. Kennedy. And, he says, he's like, I'm not anti-vax. I just want to have vaccine safety. I want to see the safety tests. And we fast track these different vaccines. We've never looked to see how they are all combined and what that impact is. And then we have a lot of prepared, packaged, and processed foods. We have a lot of genetically modified organisms in our food. And let me just explain how that works. So when you grow a natural plant that doesn't have anything done to it, your body recognizes that as food. And you can, alter plants with other plants, and that is still natural. But when you put a genetically modified organism into a plant, what happens is there's a bacteria that is placed into the plant. And that bacteria is what they use, as a pesticide type of control. And it's when we ingest it, it's now not just food, it's food and there's this bacteria. And so when we are eating it and it goes through our digestive tract, our body is like, is this food or is this a pathogen or a bacteria that I need to eradicate? And so that's when we start this sort of epidemic of leaky gut. And leaky gut then leads to, just a spiral of different health issues. And that's why we have the insulin resistance. And we have type 2 diabetes that is just exploding in the child population. And that used to be just it was called adult onset diabetes. It was from years of neglecting ourselves and not eating well. And now this is happening to our babies. This is happening to kids that are in elementary school. And they're getting puffy and they're having like this bloated tummy and they're having constipation or they're having diarrhea, they're having asthma, they're having eczema. And it's coming from having these genetically modified organisms, having these non-food, prepared, packaged, processed foods and having a lot of it and going and having a lot of fast food and not just having real food. And kids not even knowing where food comes from in many situations. So when we start changing the diet, and that's part of what I do with my clients as an FDN, is we start getting back to just real whole foods. And when you can get organic, that is the best option because that is moving away from having these different pesticides and things on it. But you have to really be careful and source that because there are times when this glyphosate is sprayed on at the end, like the produce is picked and it's sprayed on so that it doesn't get any bugs on the way to the store. And so that's when it comes to growing your own garden and utilizing a farmer's market, doing a CSA box. I love Farm Fresh to You. I think they're all over the place and they just go and they work with the local farms. And one of the things I love about that particular program is you get to pick what you want in your box. And so years ago, when I would first started doing CSAs, which is community supported agriculture, you would just get whatever, you got in the box. And so there would be times where I'm like, wow, I'm eating a lot of kale, or there would be things in there that I wasn't even sure what they were. And so I got to experiment a lot with how to cook different greens or prepare them. But now with companies like Farm Fresh to You, you can take things out of the box and you can put things in the box. And that gives you more control of what you're getting. And so you can be more comfortable and you can experiment when you want to, or as you want to, or maybe you come across a recipe that sounds really good and you're going to try it out. Then the next time you order your CSA box, you add that ingredient in. And the time from farm to home is super short. So you don't have to have these extra chemicals sprayed on to maintain the product. And so if you are suffering from sort of any of these different things, brain fog, constipation, the bloat, I always call it the battle of the bloat because I definitely had it. And you start switching what you're eating to more organic products. You're being more careful with where you source your products. When you want to have quick snacks, that now you're going to the bulk section of the grocery store and you're loading up on nuts and dried fruits, and you can keep that and it lasts a long time and it's a great snack and it's healthy and hearty for you and it's giving you the energy that you need. You can be, doing hard-boiled eggs, and I know in my neighborhood, you can drive around and there's always somebody who's selling. It's actually very fortunate. There's somebody selling strawberries, there's somebody selling honey, and there's usually somebody selling eggs that are just people that are using the land that they have. There are certainly what you would call food deserts, and those tend to be in the poorer communities. And if you've ever heard of the Green Machine in Bronx, New York, this is a teacher who really started teaching his kids how to grow and has changed the face of Bronx, New York. I mean, they have gardens growing where there was just nothing, and center divides and tops of buildings, and it's just amazing. So when we come together as a community, we can create these community farms and we can make it possible for everyone to be getting these healthy foods. And the less time and money that we spend buying these fast foods, these prepared products, the fewer companies are going to make them because it's not going to be profitable for them anymore. And it's just these small steps that change what's happening, and it's going to change the health of our children. It's going to change the trajectory of what's happening, not only in the United States, but around the world. But the United States, we're becoming one of the sickest nations, and it's considered a threat to the sovereignty of the United States is our health status, how we're doing healthy. And being this, sort of mega power that we are, the fact that we're failing so significantly in the realm of healthcare, and that we're creating laws to box people in to do things, and they haven't been tested for safety. I have a problem with that. I want the safety tests. I want to know that I'm not doing more harm. And when we start talking about, different things like herd immunity, well, if you do the research, you'll find out that herd immunity is based off of getting wild diseases and not off of vaccinated populations. And so we have these falsehoods, these perpetuation of untruths going on in the media, and it's because the media is owned by pharmaceutical companies. And we need to change that. We need to take our power back, and it really starts with people like you and me who start saying, I want good, clean food. I want rigorous safety tests. I want to know what's really going on. Monsanto, was bought by Bayer, and now they have their second or third $2 billion fine against the damages that glyphosate is creating. And these companies are all intertwined, and we need to be asking why. Why are these companies intertwined? And why are we allowing a small percentage of people to get wealthy off the backs of the middle class and the lower class, and allowing ourselves to get boxed into a paradigm that's not, we can't perpetuate it. We can't. We are in a downward slide, and we need to make changes, and doing them at the grassroots level, I think, is really, really important. And when we have healthy food, then we have healthy bodies, and we don't have to worry as much about having these various diseases, because our bodies' immune systems are ready and prepared to take on different challenges. We're uniquely designed to be able to handle living in this environment. And I believe that we have an innate ability to heal, but we have to give ourselves the right tools to do that. So that's been my talk about glyphosate, vaccines, the movie Secret Ingredients, and why what we have is super important in the foods that we eat and the way we take care of ourselves. When we come back, the next thing that I've had a lot of people asking me about is the different uses of CBD oil. So we'll be back shortly. Welcome back to Hidden Secrets to Health. I'm your host, Christina Cole, functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and certified health coach. And I started the show talking about chakras and the importance of healing those first and second chakras, which often go ignored, or the shadow side doesn't necessarily come to light. And then I talked about the importance of the foods that we eat, the movie that's out right now called Secret Ingredients, the impact glyphosate and vaccines have been having on our society, and why it's important to start removing those prepared, packaged, and processed foods from your diet, getting organic where you can, as often as you can, and really being careful with how you source your food. One of the things that I didn't bring up that I wanted to was, if you go to a website called greenmedinfo.com and you just type in glyphosate, you'll come up with 239 abstracts with glyphosate research. And there's also 65 diseases that have been researched for glyphosate. So in the show Secret Ingredients, one of the people that was on the show talked about her struggle with getting pregnant, and how when she cleaned up her diet, she was successful in becoming pregnant, versus going through IVF and some of these other methods. So we have a pretty big crisis in our ability to have babies, and what maybe 20 years ago was not that as big of an issue as it is today. Now it's super common to need to have assistance when it comes to pregnancy. And I know for my husband and I, when we decided we were going to try to have a family, it took us 2 years, and it was the changing of my diet and cleaning up my leaky gut that in my opinion is what made the difference for us, and why we ended up having not one but 2 beautiful, healthy children. And they've continued to be on this type of a healthy diet. And I see a significant difference in how healthy they stay throughout the year. And, being younger kids, what a difference it makes by the food that they're eating when it comes to their immune system. So some of the things that you could look up and you'll see on this these studies is glyphosate toxicity, DNA damage, pesticide toxicity, lymphoma non-Hodgkin's, hormonal disorders in children, low testosterone, lymphoma, prenatal chemical exposures, the impact on oxidative stress. And I've said this many times, I'm going to say it again, 80% of all visits to a doctor are stress related, and our allopathic doctors do not get education on how to work with oxidative stress as the root cause of a lot of the chronic illnesses that we suffer from. And it's not out of lack of desire, it's at lack of, that's not how they're educated. The different skin cancers, chemical exposure, allergic airway diseases, blood diseases, melanoma, rheumatoid arthritis, rhinitis, neurotoxicity, infertility in men, endocrine diseases, liver cancer, Parkinson's, chronic kidney disease, low dopamine levels, mercury poisoning, postnatal care and breastfeeding. The list is just mind-blowing that we've done these different studies. Children living within 500 meters of pesticide-spraying areas are showed to have more evidence of genetic damage than those living more than 3,000 miles away. So, the kids that are living in farming communities are more likely to get sick if the farming communities are using pesticides that have glyphosate in them. We really need to pay attention to this because we can't afford to have our children growing up unhealthy and not being able to give their gifts to the world because they're just trying to survive. So I'm gonna leave that alone, glyphosate. And one of the things I wanted to talk about, because I do get lots of questions since I did the CBD oil segment on CBD oils. And so one of the tools that I really like to use when it comes to answering questions with regard to CBD is there's a website called Green Flower, and it's green-flower.com. And they have a bunch of videos. They have blogs. They have an educational program. And it really dives into this different information. But today they have a speaker that's a grower, and he talks about terpenes. And one of the reasons why that's so significant is the terpenes. So there are 420,000 plus terpenes in the natural world, and cannabis contains well over 200, and most other plants have one or two. So that's pretty significant. And I think sometimes there's confusion between oils that have THC in them and oils that don't. And they do work differently, and they do have benefits for different reasons. But every person who's using a CBD oil is not, quote unquote, getting high, right? And it's useful for a lot of different things. So one of the articles that I thought was really powerful is 7 benefits of treating multiple sclerosis with cannabis. There's also 9 facts about cannabis and diabetes is an article, 21 substances more dangerous than cannabis that are totally legal, some of the different legislation that's going on, and 7 ways hemp plastic can change the world. So here's this plant that it's called weed because it grows like weeds, and it grows very quickly. It's sustainable, it's renewable. So it's a great resource that we should be using, that we've outlawed, and we've outlawed hemp in many situations, as well as the actual cannabis plant that people have used for self-medication for years. And it was in the early 1900s. You can go back and look at how cannabis was used over the counter. It was really commonly used. It was only when we started sort of trying to manufacture natural elements and sell them that some of these different natural medicines became a problem, became illegal. And we started sort of outlawing the use for these different tools. And cannabis, I think, is one that we should really be looking at all the different uses that it comes into. So I'm just going to touch on some of the ways that hemp can make a big difference when it comes to plastic, because that's a really big problem we have in the world. So it takes 500 to 1,000 years for plastic to degrade. The United States alone throws away about 35 billion plastic water bottles every year, and the plastic ends up in the land and the sea. It devastates our natural ecosystems, and it ends up as pollution in our own bodies. So it's estimated that 93% of Americans over the age of 6 test positive for BPA, which is the chemical in plastic linked to cancer, diabetes, impaired immunity, and so much more. So why would we want to use hemp in place of that? Well, hemp is completely biodegradable. A water bottle can be used for a few minutes, but it'll take years to decompose. whereas it takes 3 to 6 months for hemp plastic to decompose. So that's a tremendous difference. Conventional plastics are still that are recycled are still likely to leak harmful substances, and plastic made from hemp completely avoids these toxins. So conventional plastics contain endocrine disruptors. One of those is being BPA, and this interference with the endocrine system causes hormone imbalances. In particular, it is an estrogen mimicker, and when our estrogen is mimicked in this way, then we have a buildup of estrogen. This is one of the reasons why we see more cancers that are linked to an estrogen dominance. We also have, we usually end up with more weight on our bodies. This kind of leads into insulin resistance and diabetes. So there's a pretty vicious cycle that starts to happen when we have endocrine disruptors in our bodies. Hemp plastic could help save endangered wildlife. There was a study by the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization that found that 60% of seabirds today have plastic in their gut. And by 2050, they expect that number could rise to 99%. So, we're not just destroying ourselves and our environment, but we're also, endangering the wildlife that, keeps our ecosystem going. Hemp plastic is extraordinarily versatile. And so it can be used in electronics, containers, toys, cosmetics, bottles, bags, car parts, boats, furniture. Hemp plastic decreases environmental pollutants. So a plastic bag from conventional plastics has a rising CO2 emissions, whereas hemp does not create that. The plastic is stronger than petroleum-based plastics. So plastic made from hemp is 5 times stiffer and 3.5 or 3.5 stronger than polypropylene, one of the most common types of plastic. It is also a lot lighter, and this makes hemp unique from other manufacturing materials. It's a renewable resource. So that's just talking about using hemp, not even any of the other products. So using, the more we learn about CBD and the more we can use this as a renewable resource, and replacing some of these pharmaceuticals that it's used for, like anxiety, and it helps with diabetes. And I'm curious to read this article about multiple sclerosis and the benefits of using cannabis oil in that method. We need to start looking at these renewable resources and these natural medicines as a way out of the jam that we're in, environmentally, as a country, financially. And we need to find a way to come back in together as a community. So this has been the Hidden Secrets to Health. I hope you've enjoyed sort of the variety of topics we touched on today, from chakras to organic foods to CBD oil, and some of the different damages that we're causing ourselves by using chemicals in place of the natural environment. So thanks, and this has been the Hidden Secrets to Health.